We have this period in our household anyway where, yeah, we want to keep the windows open, but we want to wake up to a warm house. So I woke up this morning and the heater was on and the windows were open. We need to make a decision here. Well, I am the creator. How does that, when you say that to yourself, I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about all of us individually. When you say, I am the creator, how does it feel? Let's test it. Let's all together say, I am the creator. Oh, with a little bit more gusto than that. I am the creator. I am the creator. Okay, so how does that feel? You feel kind of guilty? You feel like, well, maybe there's a lightning bolt that's just priming to strike me dead? We certainly have been taught in our traditional religion that we're just scum of the earth. We don't have any role in the greater presence. That it's all in God's hands. And we motion out there, indicating that I don't want any responsibility. It's out there. The responsibility is out there. I'm not going to take any part in it. It's not my fault. I don't care what you say. I wasn't there. And I won't be there, regardless of what happens. Well, okay, you can use that approach if you want. It has some inherent flaws to it, not the least of which is that it's not in keeping with reality, but we all live in illusions of some sort. So, this process of creativity, this process of creating, how many of you have enjoyed some creative pursuit? Writing, painting, building, any kind of making manifest something that was not manifest before. You know, I look back and I see Pam, and in fact there are a number of teachers and past teachers here in our audience, and I think of the process, and Shannon is going to school to become a teacher, and I think of the process that a teacher must go through. I mean, in the end, I am a teacher as well, so while I don't grade homework assignments, nonetheless, I hope that some of the things that I say are taken as a homework assignment. But nonetheless, I see the act of a teacher as being a very creative process. You have a group of students in your charge, and some of those students have a proclivity for talking, and others have a proclivity for other kinds of behavior that may or may not be in harmony with the rest of the class. And you have the challenge of taking some body of material and presenting it in such a way that those individuals are able to grasp it. Each of the individuals are able to grasp it. That's, wow, that's quite a skill. In our creative efforts, we are given feedback. Feedback that is not necessarily from the audience, not necessarily from the observers of our creation, but we're given feedback in our hearts, aren't we? There is a sense of, there's a sense of satisfaction, of fulfillment, of being able to take something and some idea and create some manifest outcome. Well, we have the Drepung monks coming in at the end of the month. the 24th through the 29th. I think you all got a flyer. If you didn't, you ran past the greeter on the way in. And I was preparing the sand painting board. That, one of their demonstrations while they're here is going to be these 6 monks are going to be involved in constructing a sand painting. And you can see on the photo there as well. Oh, wow, that didn't come out too bright. But these monks are laying down a grain at a time, or 2 grains or 3 grains at a time, from a little tool that is a little bucket of colored sand with a very small hole in the bottom. And they get the sand to come out by tapping the stick on which this bucket is mounted. And so constructing a mandala requires a flat board, a board that's not going to flex, because there's nothing sticky on that board. This is just sand that falls onto it. So there's, 100 monk hours or so, and a monk hour is not equivalent to a man hour. A monk hour is actually more productive than a man hour, but that, never mind. So there's about 100 hours of development that goes, or of creation that goes into these mandalas. And the discipline is one of celebrating impermanence. That is to say, at the end of their stay here, at the end of their 6 days here, they're going to take a broom and a dustpan, and they're going to scoop all of this sand into a bucket, and we're going to go down to Ralston Creek, and we're going to have a closing ceremony that will include dumping the sand into the river. Well, what is this about? It's not just a money-making ploy. I mean, yes, they're going to be here on a fundraising tour, and yes, the events that they're going to be holding are going to be a donation, a suggested donation of $15, but that's to support their monastery back in the south of India. But this discipline is a discipline that is engaged back there, where there's no audience, where their only activity is going to be a sand painter. And so their participation in this is a celebration of impermanence. So we have, on the one hand, we have the creative aspect of painting this sand, and then on the other hand, we realize that creation is not a permanent fixture in this world. And that's just exactly what we go through, whether we acknowledge it or not. That which we create in this moment may not be here in the next moment. But nonetheless, the satisfaction that we derive in that creation is not dependent upon permanence. Now, we may be attached to it such that if it goes away, we are disheartened, we are somehow insulted, perhaps. But the process of creation is, in and of itself, is not dependent upon the endurance or the duration of that created thing. It's the act itself. And so our discipline of creation is one where we gain satisfaction from the act itself. And these monks exemplify that process of creating. What they're constructing here is called a mandala. It represents, in the Buddhist tradition, it represents a pictorial representation of the universe. And the center, well, here's another completed mandala. The center is the object of their journey. The outer realm here is this world. And in the meditation on the mandala, they move from the worldly into the ethereal, from the manifest into the realm of spirit. And each of these, by the way, represents the five senses. In each there is a silk cloth that is through the figure, and that silk cloth represents the sense of touch. Here we have a lyra, and that represents the sound. Here we have a mirror that represents sight. Up here we have a conch shell that has perfume bubbling from it, and that represents the sense of smell. And up there we have peaches on a tree, and that represents the sense of taste. So these four symbols represent each of the five senses. So from the sensate world into the realm of nirvana is the journey of the meditator. Okay? So the meditation on the mandala is from the outer to the inner. So the monks are going to explain that more. The process, though, of creating this mandala as a sand painting is something that we'll be able to observe. We can observe it for all of their creating hours. We'll be open from 10 until 4, where they will be focused on this. And then in the evenings, we're going to have other activities, and you see the schedule there. The only thing we don't have yet is the definition of when the events are going to be on that Saturday. Okay, so the act of creation is an act that each and every one of us participates in. From the act of the extraordinary to the mundane. From the act of creation by somebody else far away, or our own creation. Now, this is an important part of this topic I'm offering you. And that is that we are each participating in the creation that occurs in our world. We are each participating in this creation. I'm reading a book by Paul Davies. He's a cosmologist, a physicist that studies the origin and evolution of the universe. And he makes the point that there has been proof after proof after proof after proof at the experimental level of this quantum notion that each particle in the universe affects each and every particle in the universe, in the entire universe. So a particle here will in fact have influence on a particle at the very end of our observable universe. That's hard for me to fathom. You know, I have a hard time realizing that I have an influence over my grandson. And, you know, he's oftentimes only 5 feet away. So having this idea of this entire universe being so interrelated that every particle has influence on every other particle boggles my imagination. Okay, I don't know about it. I know of it, but I am not an expert in it. I will trust what they have to say. At the same time, we are responsible for the creation of every other person. Now that's a little bit more fathomable for me. I can start to get my hands around this idea that I have influence over the compassion or over the beneficence, over the deeds that are great. I have a challenge with my having an influence over the atrocities, over the acts of greed, over the acts of adverse behavior. Yet that is what we learn when we go deeper and deeper into an awareness of who we are and how we relate to each and every other person. We have an influence over every aspect of creation in our society, in our culture, in our planet. This, you've heard me use this example before, but Thich Nhat Hanh uses it often, so I'll feel free to use it again here. He holds up a blank piece of paper, and he asks his students, what do you see in this blank piece of paper? And he goes on to explain that in that blank piece of paper, there are the people who processed the paper, the workers in the plant. There are the lumberjacks in the forest. There are the significant others of those workers that have prepared the breakfast. And there are the chicken farmers who grew the chickens, that laid the eggs, that supplied the grocery stores from which the significant others purchased the product to create the breakfast of the lumberjack. And so it is that when we look at any aspect of our environment, we can look at that and we can see all of those who were participating in its manifestation. We can look at the teachers who taught the people how to do what they need to do in order to create that which they were created. We can look at the parents. We can look at the children. We can see that there is a web of relationships, regardless of whether we value those connections or not, whether or not we acknowledge the influence. Nonetheless, there is this web of relationships of which we are a part. And what we do affects those around us. Perhaps in subtle ways, perhaps in very apparent ways. But there is a web of relationships that our creation affects others. Whether it's creation like I was participating in creating the board upon which this work of art is going to be laid, or the monks themselves creating that. What kind of influence do they have when they come into a city and they have this 5-foot by 5-foot board upon which they express their talents? How are they influencing those around them? The people that come in to watch them, the people that are affected by the people who come in to watch them, the people that are affected by the people who are affected by the people that come in to watch them. There is this ripple of influence and effect that goes out throughout this web of relationships. And it is important for us to recognize that we are part and parcel of that. Trinity posted, our vocalist, Trinity, posted on Facebook, I think it was last night, the satisfaction that she felt when she let someone who was in a rush cut in front of her in the grocery store line. Maybe some of you saw that post early this morning. Yes, there is that sense of, I'm not expecting anything in return. This person's in a rush. I'll not see this person again. But letting that person get in line to be able to get out to their car and get on with their day, whatever their day was, that is that's an act that has a unique sense of satisfaction to it. There was an article posted a couple of weeks ago about a Starbucks in St. Petersburg, Florida, where at 7 a.m. A fella came through the drive-thru and he ordered a cup of coffee, and he said, "Oh, by the way, pay for what the person in the car behind me ordered." Because they had two windows, one taking the order and one delivering the order. They knew what the next person was about. So he paid forward. And that paying forward lasted until 6 o'clock that night. There were 379 consecutive customers who had the opportunity, who were given the opportunity to pay it forward, and they did. Think about the effect that act of generosity, of paying it forward. See, every one of those people had the opportunity to say, no thanks, but thank the guy that just left for my coffee, if you would please. Every one of them had the opportunity to take advantage, right? To take advantage of the benevolence of the universe and accept that free cup of coffee. But they chose to pay it forward. And in each and every act, there was that sense of satisfaction. And that sense of satisfaction paved their day. Paved their day with a particular attitude of gratitude, a particular attitude of generosity. Perhaps that was the only thing during their day that had that kind of effect on them, but it did have an effect on them. And every one of the people that they interacted with throughout the rest of the day had the impact of that opportunity for them to pay it forward. Do you see it? Everyone that entered into their lives that particular day had the opportunity to suck in that energy, to be the benefactor of that energy of gratitude that individual experienced in that one moment. Now, it could be that they went on to do other things that brought them that satisfaction later in the day, and it rippled through the web. But you see, that is the point. It rippled through the web. And every act that we encounter, everything that we do, every act of creation that we participate in ripples through the web. In the 5 pillars of faith, I come back to this slide often because this really is the foundation of Unity's teachings. And if you really grok these 5 principles, then you understand unity. There's one power and one presence, God the good, omnipotent. It's not a God out there that's omnipotent, but rather it is the power of omnipotence that God is. The one Son of God, the Christ, abides in each of us. I'll come back to that. The thoughts we hold in mind manifest in our experience, and I hit that time and time and time and time again because we have the choice of what thoughts we're going to hold. And the tools of transformation of prayer and meditation, denials and affirmation, those are the means by which we transform our own consciousness so that when we enter into a new moment, we have a platform from which we can express. And that platform from which we can express is a platform of recognizing one power and one presence, a platform of recognizing that the divine is in us, that we have the choice of the thoughts that we hold in mind. And the 5th principle. The 5th principle is that we change our lives by implementing these things that we know. Okay, let's go back to number 2. The one Son of God, the Christ, abides in each of us. We look upon that and we say, oh boy, isn't that great? God is present. But we often think, well, God as out there has come in and has chosen to be present within us. But that's coming from that concept of separation in the beginning, right? It comes from that idea that God was separate until we invited God in. Or God was separate until God barged in without our invitation and took up residence in our heart. And I wonder how much space He's actually taking because, I've got a weak heart and I need to make sure that I have enough blood flow to my brain. Because brain, after all, is where all the creativity occurs. So this idea that the one Son of God, the Christ, the divine presence, is present in each and every one of us. We come at that from the idea that we are separate from that, and isn't it great that God is choosing to abide within us? You see what I'm getting at? If we instead say, oh, wait a minute, that's a fundamental characteristic of who I am. It's not that God has come into me, but rather I am recognizing that God is me. That the divine presence is here not because it chose to be here, but because that's what God is. God is present here and now. God is present in each and every one of us. Not as a separate entity, not as someone, not as a divine essence that has chosen to be part of us, but rather the divine essence is us. And we just go about this idea, this illusion that we are separate and apart from that, and it is in that illusion of separation that we get into all of our pain and tribulation. But when we are recognizing that we are that, that could be kind of fearful. Oops, if I am that, then there's no one else to blame for my moment-to-moment adversity. There's no one else to blame. Because I am that. I am the God that I have been praying to all of these years. I am the divine presence expressing in this moment. That is what I am about. That is why I am here. Because I am that divine expression. As we come into that realization, as we really grok that, as we allow that idea to settle into the very dark corners of our consciousness, we will then be able to say without any hesitation, I am the creator of my moment. Not just my moment, not just my separate owned self, but rather I am the creator of this moment that all of us are part of. And you are the creator of this moment. And you are the creator of this moment. And you are the creator of this moment. As every one of us is the creator of this moment. Because as we realize that we are the divine expression in this moment, there is no disharmony. It's only when we insist upon separation, it's only when we insist upon God being out there, that we get into the conflict of, well, is it in your interest or is it in my interest? And I better grab for all I can get before you grab for it because you've got bigger hands and you're faster than I am. So this idea of oneness is really not the way that we go to, but it is where we have come from. We have come from this idea of oneness, we have come from this idea of divinity into this idea of separation. And how is it and why is it that we did that? That's the topic for another talk. But here and now, as we recognize that we are God in expression, our moment is transformed. Because we can see those opportunities that we have to bless those around us. And we are generous with our blessings. Because there is no absence in God consciousness. There is no lack in God consciousness. Our awareness of our divinity, that we are indeed the Creator, that is our key to a lasting, fulfilling life. Because you see, our life is the present moment, lived fully, in awareness. That's the only experience we have, is this right now. And as we look back on the sum of our individual experiences, we can look back with regret from a sense of separation, or we can look back with satisfaction from a sense of oneness. Even those choices that were not in our apparent best interest, even those choices that took us out of this consciousness of oneness with God as an expression of God, even those can be a blessing if we learn from them. You see, we don't have a choice. We have thousands of choices. We have thousands of choices each day as to how we're going to enter into this particular second. And the attitude with which we enter the second is going to manifest in that second as a sense of fulfillment or as a sense of separation. It is up to us. How do we choose? We'll have our meditation.